Welcome in, listeners. This is Margin Mavens, a podcast hosted by Steph and Kayla, where we share our thoughts on all things literature. Today's episode is about Smoke and Scar by Gretchen Powell Fox, and we're joined by the author herself. This story follows Elyria as she goes through a gauntlet of trials in order to protect basically her sister, and in the process, maybe fall in love. Teehee! The content from today's episode contains talk of murder, death, torture, gore, and stereotypes and prejudice. Please take care of yourselves and only listen if such topics do not make you uncomfortable. Now make sure to grab a snack and a drink unless you're driving, then remember 10 and 2, and come hang out with us while we dive in. Okay, so the way that you sell this book, I think, is like really appropriate, right? Your whole shtick of tired of the like shadow daddies, like get a shadow mommy. It sold me immediately. I was like, Kayla, we need to read this book.
Things I didn't know I needed until
and then
it happened.
You were so sweet to then say that you'd be on the podcast. I was like, okay, now I have to force Kayla to read it.
You didn't have to force me.
No, but I just meant before I could tell you really anything else. I was like, well, now you have no choice. She's going to be on it. So I guess we'll start at the very beginning. What was your inspiration? What drew you to this story?
Yeah. You've already kind of were circling around it, right? Like, I am a huge fantasy, romantic fantasy. Like, give me all of it, right? I love consuming it. And I love a shadow daddy, like, literally just as much as the other girls. But as I continued to read and just dive further into my own just, like, personal fantasy era, I just, like, kept having these little, like, thoughts pop up that were like, wouldn't it be cool if, she was like the one who was the super badass Fae warrior and constantly coming to his rescue. Like, where's our like mansel in distress versus like our damsel in distress? Just like little things like that where the more that I read, the more I was like, I think that would be fun. I think that would be like a cool take. And the idea kind of formulated out of just like a collection of those thoughts and eventually just getting the really strong urge and desire to write a story and create a world of my own. So there wasn't like any singular scene or, inspiration moment where I was like, I got it. It just kind of like slowly crept up on me. And then as I started developing the world itself, all of the pieces for the story really fell into place, like as part of that process.
Speaking of, the world that you have built so far in Smoke and Scar is amazing.
Thank you.
I would love to hear more about your process around building that world. Like, what sort of inspired you to do it and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this because I don't know if it's like necessarily surprising to some people or it's just an interesting fact, but I did all of my world building before I did any of the writing of the actual story. Mm-hmm. So I know myself, and I know that like I was trying to give future Gretchen a gift, I guess, of like consistency before I really dove into like the nitty gritty of like the characters and the story itself.
Right.
Because otherwise I knew that I would be making a lot of like decisions on the fly or asking myself a lot of questions that I would then potentially like contradict or have to go back and correct later on. So it's really important for me to like do a pretty solid foundation of world building ahead of time. So I created like a whole document, like I used basically like a little wiki for myself of the world of Arcanus, which is what the world is called, which included everything from like the history of the races of the realms to kind of this big war that was, one of the, informing factors of the story, to the way the magic system works, because magic works differently for like the different races and stuff like that. And so it was really fun to be able to focus on those things without the pressure of like, how am I weaving this into the story
right
first, and then kind of going from there. You have like a wealth of knowledge that you're kind of trying to pluck from, and that brings its own challenges too, because if you know all of this lore in your head, you're like, I can't be info dumpy, like it needs to feel natural, like as the reader is coming along. I don't want to overwhelm, but yeah, I think that for me it was just try to take a lot of my favorite things about fantasy, the variety of races, but also like I really like elemental magic, like I knew that I wanted that to be like part of it, and just trying to see what fit naturally and what I enjoyed writing. Some things kind of came out as different elements were being developed and stuff like that, and some I knew like right away, like, okay, I really want to have at least X number of different races and different I think a lot of it is very much set in kind of your very traditional like epic fantasy type stuff. So like D&D and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, with like different classes or different strengths, and making sure that as a whole picture it feels well rounded, but there's a lot of variety like within it. And so all of those elements I think were really fun for me.
It was really good.
No,
lore,
you will never hear us
book
say no yap, less yap actually.
Okay,
all yap. Lore book when?
One day maybe. I definitely have enough. I don't have enough appendices for sure.
Even just like a wiki page, like an actual wiki page. I think you could create those. Yeah. All right, listeners.
Yeah, one day.
So are you like a fully digital author in terms of like your planning and your writing and kind of like the technique behind it, or do you swap between them?
Digital in terms of like using like a app or whatever versus like...
Yeah, or like some authors I've seen, especially through social media and as people share their journeys and stuff, some authors will like fully commit to writing and planning everything in like a notebook, and then they'll transfer it over and stuff.
Yeah, I've experimented a little bit over the course of time, and I wouldn't say that I'm like, super committed to even like the apps and stuff that I use currently. I feel like I'm always up for trying new things. For me, it's mostly just like convenience based. So what I use, I can, it's in the cloud or whatever. I can access it on my phone. I can obviously like work with it on the computer. And so for that reason, it works out really well for me. I think the problem with like physically brainstorming, and I have tons of notebooks full of little, little ideas that I've written down and stuff like that. But the problem is like, it's good for me to work out what I'm thinking through in the moment, but it's not really a useful reference for me because I'm not going to go back and like read through all of my notes and stuff.
Yeah.
Versus something that's like either searchable or,
right.
Like, again, just kind of has the convenience of me always having it with me or whatever, works out really well. But I know a lot of authors who are like super visual. So they like having like, like the wall of, Post-its and everything like that, being able to like physically move things around. I think it's cool that there are so many different options for people. You can basically have like a digital Post-it board now, if that is something that you would prefer to work with.
Right.
I think ultimately it's just about, where are my ideas not going to get lost, I think is like the key for myself.
Yeah.
I think that's that's everybody's, I think, goal is where can I put this thing and it's not going to get lost.
I feel like I have, overcome my previous barrier, which was I'd have an idea and I wouldn't jot it down or like record it anywhere, and then it would just be gone forever. So I feel like I'm better about actually getting it down now. But now the problem is like, where did I get it down? And like,
where did I put it?
Go back and revisit it. I have these like on my phone in the notes, my notes on my phone, I have one note that's just like voice memos to myself because it's all like ideas that I've had while driving. And so it's just like me like talking, but ultimately like if I actually gonna listen back through like these 5-minute long like me waxing on about some idea.
Yeah, it's the same thing of when I used to like
it's there if I do end up needing to go back for it, I guess.
Yeah, I used to like record the lectures when I was in like college and stuff, and I was like, if I need them, they're there.
Yeah, exactly. Contingency.
Am I gonna ever actually go and open it if I like lived through the 1.5-hour lecture once? Am I gonna go through and listen to it again?
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
But it's there.
Also, I don't think I like hearing my voice enough to just like listen to it.
Honestly, facts.
She has never once edited the videos. Listeners, that's what this is.
Correct.
What's a timeline for you when it comes to writing? So from the moment of like inception, or I guess inception to I'm deciding I'm actually going to write it, to like this book is now in the reader's hands.
So it's pretty fast when I'm hyperfixated on an idea.
We love mental illness.
I have ADHD, and so I've learned that when the muse strikes, like I need to like follow her lead. And so because of that, the timeline for getting Smoke and Scar out was actually pretty fast, I think, by like kind of most standards. I think I started my world building like early summer of 2024.
That is crazy.
Came out in March. So it was really quite fast. I will say
wild.
that it is, of course, impacted by a lot of other factors. So the writing for book 2 is not that fast. All of the, like, I'm very grateful, of course, that the book has been doing well, and it's really exciting, but I have a lot more things kind of like eating at my attention now.
Yeah.
That like I actually have one book out. So I was a little over optimistic originally, thinking how quickly I'd be able to, like, well, I wrote book 1 really fast. Like, I can write book 2, that being said, it's, I think, also just, a little bit of a balancing act with, all of those different factors. And so it's like, this is a good learning lesson for me too, about whether or not I'm able to maintain that kind of like momentum and forward motion, or,
give yourself the grace
like
and stuff.
Like
yeah.
now, I guess I'm like, I have to carve out time for writing and, like, be purposeful about when I do things versus just like, I spent a lot of like really late nights staying up writing Smoke and Scar just because I was like really motivated and I, wanted to get the story out and stuff like that. So
I think, not to sound like overly like, the only word that's coming to my brain is like ass kisser. But like, for how fast you have just said, like, you wrote Smoke and Scar, I think it's incredibly, like, it's a testament to the talent in the fact that it didn't sound like that when I read it, because no shade. And normally I'm not against being a little shady when the time calls for it. But I think, especially with TikTok and social media, a lot of people are picking up writing, which is great because everybody's got some sort of story to tell and everything like that. But it does get, I think, a little hard sometimes because you end up having people churning out books super quickly and they're not necessarily the best they could have been because they're trying to capitalize on some sort of trope popularity or something. And so it's actually really cool to see that you wrote this one so fast. And it doesn't feel like that. It felt very like fleshed out and like a lot of time was taken. Not that, there wasn't a decent amount of time.
It felt very intentional.
Thank you so much. I think, I think the amount of time spent writing maybe is comparable to a lot of like, people who take longer. Is just like in a condensed
it was just a lot more condensed. I get it.
Just like a lot of time per day, I guess, doing this. But thank you. That means so much. And I am quite proud of the book, honestly. I mean, it is tricky to navigate, especially, with like indie publishing and social media and like the incredible opportunity that it presents to authors who, like choose to go down maybe a non-traditional path or whatever. Like, it's amazing. There's a lot of pressure too to feel like you need to keep that momentum up, like feel like you need to respond really quickly to trends and like that constant looming threat of like, am I gonna miss it, like like am I get that inclination a lot. And I think that especially now thinking about book 2 and stuff like that, I'm constantly torn between being like, because I'm planning on releasing book 2 this fall.
Don't worry, I wrote it down.
That is, by traditional like publishing standards, that's still very fast.
Yes,
it is.
Like 6-8 months or whatever between publication. Like, that's really fast.
Well, nutty. Not saying change your mind, but
sorry,
not saying change your mind.
No, I'm not. I think it's pretty, like, that was me being like, I think that's giving myself like a generous buffer, honestly. Just again, like, knowing I did write fast, but like knowing that I probably wouldn't be able to maintain that for the second and third book. But there are authors who are able to pump out books even faster than that. There are there's just such a wide range, I think, of what people can do, the paths they choose. I think genre has a lot to do with it too. Like writing fantasy is a lot more just word count heavy, I think, than like maybe more like of a contemporary romance where you do have to do like less of that heavy world building and stuff like that. So it's a constant, like, in my mind, I'm like, am I going too fast? Am I not being fast enough? Like, it's a lot of noise, but ultimately I am super proud of like this book, and I'm excited about the direction, for where to go. And I feel like hopefully, regardless of what the timeline ends up being, or, if I can scooch it up or whatever, people will be excited, hopefully, to continue the story.
I'm people and I'm excited.
If there are no people, we are dead.
And I plan on outliving quite a few of my enemies, so
Yeah. We are living out of spite over here. We are not.
When it comes to, I guess, like when you're writing, right? What is something that, or I guess, what is a piece of your writing that you think you might like struggle with? What are the scenes that are harder for you, and what are the scenes that like are pretty easy?
Yeah, I think that hard is of course very relative. Like, in terms of technically difficult or like what feels like a slog for me, it's a lot of the like connecting pieces between the major moments. So, like, I saw a meme or like a joke or something. It was like, no one ever told me when I was gonna be an author I would spend so much time describing people getting up from chairs and sitting down in chairs and walking into rooms and walking out of rooms or whatever. And I was like, that is very real.
Yeah.
Those little moments that actually like showcase,
How they're doing
stuff
things.
happening,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think can sometimes be like, I have to remind myself, like, oh wait, white room syndrome is a thing that's like, I catch a lot of it in like the second pass kind of thing, but I tend to, of course, gravitate, I think a lot of writers do, towards like the exciting moments or, the moments where
Right.
things are happening. In terms of like hard, like difficult for me emotionally speaking, there's a lot. Without getting into like spoilers and stuff within this book, there's definitely like a lot of like emotionally, charged moments that
No.
were, again, like hard.
What do you mean?
Not like hard
No.
to write, but like hard to like be like, meh,
Yeah.
like
No.
this is hard for me too, kind of thing. So whatever you guys were feeling reading them, I also felt them right.
No. When you decided to start writing and going down the path of being an author and everything, did you know that you would also kind of have to be your like social media marketer and your maybe even like legal counsel and all of those things? Were you kind of aware of all the hats that you would have to put on?
I honestly don't think it's possible for anyone to like truly know how many hats you wear as an indie author until you actually go through it. I was pretty prepared, I think. So my long like backstory is that this is not my first novel. I first published a dystopian book back in 2012. And at that time, like Book Talk and Bookstagram were not a thing. But I was kind of involved in like the blogging world, which was like our equivalent back then. And so I launched the book to like, modicum self-publishing success. It was still so new. And then like, oh, it turns out I did have ADHD. And so like I kind of fell off of the track for a long time because of life. And I just kind of got back into it like at the very beginning of last year. And so because I had gone through that experience, I had like a little bit of a sense, of course, at least, okay, if I'm going to go down the path of indie publishing, I'm going to be the one not only writing my book, but like formatting it and like finding my cover designer and, getting the word out and stuff like that. And then with the advent now of social media, it's like a whole different ballgame because of course you can just sink so much time and energy into social media marketing. Like truly, I could literally be doing it all day, every day. Like you just can. Like, not that I'm saying that anyone has to or should, but you potentially could literally just hop from platform to platform to platform to platform, creating content and responding to people and engaging with people like at any given time. So finding that balance has definitely been a learning lesson and something that's tricky. And I think that every indie author probably goes through this calibration maybe of like how much is necessary to kind of keep things going without like getting into burnout territory. you know where am I getting the most for the time and energy that I'm sinking into this, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that with every new opportunity that comes along, with every kind of milestone that this book hits, new hats start popping up out of places too. And, luckily, with kind of the democratization of publishing that like indie publishing and social media has provided, I also have access to a lot more resources now. So like there's a wealth of information out there, right? Like I watch YouTube videos, I talk to other indie authors, there's like forums and discords that I'm part of and stuff like that. And everyone genuinely seems really cool about answering questions and helping out. And I feel very much the same way. Like anytime an author comes in like has a question for me, I want to be able to answer that and like, you know, to the best of my ability, or at least point them in the direction of someone who maybe could help. But yeah, it's definitely a lot. It's a big juggling act, balancing act. And I think it's cool that like there are all of these like things that we can basically like all do ourselves now, or, you know, we have the creative control to determine like who you're gonna bring onto your like team. Like right now my team is like a team of like 1.5 sort of, because I do have someone who helps me out. I have a PA, but I'm like a famously bad delegator too, and she's always yelling at me to be like, tell me, give me more stuff, like kind of thing. So yeah, it can be a lot for sure, but I mean it's cool too. Like I've connected with more people in the past year, you know, 14 months than I have like in a very long time, and that's really cool too, to have all of those different like branches kind of going out. So
yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun, I think.
Speaking of kind of all of those connections, one thing I'm always curious about is you as an author, do you like go into reviewer spaces? Like what are kind of some like boundaries that you place for the sake of like not being sad?
I'm famously masochistic, so you know, no, it's once the book actually was published, it was a lot easier for me. Like in the lead up to publishing, you're still doing a lot of things like with arc campaigns and trying to, you know, see how things are tracking ahead of time and wanting to pull quotes from reviews and stuff like that. So it's a little bit harder to maintain like a clear boundary. Now that the book is out, I'm a little bit better. You know, you still get tempted to like go in and just see. My boundaries are definitely that like reader spaces are for reader spaces. I don't like respond to, you know, reviewers or anything like that, like on Goodreads or anything. And I personally don't review publicly. I know that that's kind of like controversial for some authors who especially like were really heavy readers. I mean, I've always been a heavy reader, but I just like personally, I love reading. I use Goodreads to like track all of my reads, but I don't like rate or review other work anymore. And that's just my personal take on, you know, my role now that I've like, you know,
make a pseudonym just for reviewing.
Yeah.
I just know that I like have felt a certain type of way when I've seen like another like Goodreads author review, you know, of my work, being like, man, like, you know, like, you know, again, everyone is like entitled to have their own take, and like if you are comfortable knowing that I feel some sort of way about that, like, you know, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that it's so hard, right? So I don't know if either of you have ever watched The Good Place, but
I love The Good Place.
I love The Good
I
Place.
sob.
Scene at the like in the final season or whatever, and one of the characters is put to this test where she has to walk down a hallway, and she knows that every single person in every single one of the rooms is talking about her, and the test is to make it to the end of the hallway without going into any of the rooms.
Yeah, I would fail.
I kind of equate like the fact that like reviews for our work exists like that. Like it is technically possible to not look, but you know they're all talking about you.
Yeah.
So it's just like human nature to be curious about what people are saying. I think that like it's also just a novelty thing. So like anytime I feel like your new book comes out or your work is out freshly, you're going to be that much more like honed in on like, what are people saying? You know, like I need to know. And the more distance I get from the release date, the easier it is for me just to like not think about it as much, you know, and you're focused on other things. Of course, my advice to any author is always going to be like, don't read your reviews, but like do as I say, don't do as I do.
Yeah. So you went to your first like book signing event in the last couple months, right? I peeped it. What was something that you loved, right? Apart from obviously like getting to meet readers and stuff like that. What was just something about the experience you loved? And what is something that you kind of took away going like, I can do that better?
What a great question. So
Thanks. I just thought of it.
It was great. I loved, and I feel like a lot of authors will feel this way. It's kind of like a bucket list thing, right? To check off the idea of like having your book signing, right? Like signing books for people in public, you know, it's just like an author milestone. And so that was amazing. And you know, just like you said, like the most obvious thing is that getting the chance to connect with readers in person. I was truly stunned, like flabbergasted that so many people came out to see me, like just like I'm just a girl,
I'm just a little lady.
at my first signing, which was in a local Barnes and Noble. Like the staff was like, we were not expecting, like, like people were like lined up down like the aisle and stuff like that. It was very humbling. I would say one thing I think I could do better is I just overcommitted to events within like the first month of the release. And so, I initially set out being like, I just want to do, like one thing to kind of commemorate the launch of the book, but I had reached out to several stores and they all said yes. And then, like, I'm like, great, kind of thing. And like things just kind of kept getting added on. And so I ended up having like 5 in like 4 weeks or whatever.
That's crazy.
And so
That's a
without
lot.
it actually being like a true book tour where I'm like 100% focused on that and I have help and, like assistance, it was a lot in terms of like the logistics and the bringing of books and making sure I had ordered enough and just like a lot of that stuff. So I think that in the future I would just be a little bit more mindful of what I was committing myself
and delegating to your PA.
And delegating, exactly. And that being said, I mean, I certainly don't regret any of them. Like, it was, it made this kind of like first, month, 6 weeks or whatever, like very special and feel very like commemorative, right, of the launch of the book. But I am very glad that they're done for a while now.
My last non-spoiler question. Are there special editions of your book?
There are not currently any special
I've seen
editions.
some things.
I've seen
some pretty looking books.
We have alternate dust jackets that one of the artists that I've worked with, she licensed the artwork, like the characters and stuff, so she sells them on Etsy, so you can get alternate dust jackets. And the standard edition of the hardcover is, a lot of people tell me it looks like a special edition because it has like artwork on the cover, on the inside. Actually,
nice. This is what I signed up for.
Yeah.
This is the hard case of the
wow.
So like underneath the regular.
I would just started cursing and then I realized my editor would punch me.
So that's what's on here. And then, sorry, I know that this is like podcast, so people are not like.
Oh no, we go on YouTube too. It's fine. They see you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the like alternate dust jackets and stuff like that. So I do have those available, but they're not technically special editions. They're just available for anybody.
Nice.
So you're setting the bar real high for special editions, is what I'm hearing now.
Again, I've said this word like 5 times already, but it's cool that like the authors can do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they have complete control. You don't have to like go to a big 5 overlord.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, people have a lot of feelings about Ingram Spark, which is one of the like major distributors that self-published and indie authors are able to utilize to get books out there. And, for good reason. But I, having been here from the beginning, like in like, oh, okay, grandpa kind of way.
Since ye old times.
Exactly. Back in my day. I can say definitively that it is very cool that we have the ability to do this on our own,
Yeah.
And like through a print on demand service, which means it's like affordable and I'm not, having 1,000 books that I have to figure out how to sell myself in order to have pretty books, which is how it used to be. So yeah, I think that's really cool, and definitely, there are, other things that may be coming down the pipeline too. But
heck yeah, we love the pipeline.
I support it.
All right, listeners.
Spoilers.
I was asking a bunch of questions that were really important to me, but the entire time I'm just looking at Kayla. She's like foaming at the mouth.
Time to get into the nitty gritty.
Into the nitty gritty. Okay, so
first of all, how dare?
Yeah.
And that's just a blanket how dare. Because there's so many things
Pick one.
that I could say how dare on. But like, why you do my girl Zephyr like that? Why
really?
You do my
did
girl
she do anything to Zephyr, or did Zephyr?
like, no, I'm reading it at the beginning. I'm like, oh my god, I love her. She's gonna die. And then, you know what? She doesn't
She's
die.
dead to me.
She betrays everybody.
She's dead to me. R.I.P. Zephyr. I can't believe the gauntlet killed her. That's crazy.
she doesn't exist. The number of DMs that I get of like people reneging like on their previous statements about Zephyr, like they'll be like, "Oh, I loved her. She carries snacks.
Be like, I take it back. She's dead to me.
And then like at the end being like, never mind.
Yeah.
No, say it ain't so.
So we get throughout the story, right? We get very much like forced proximity, but in the like coolest way ever, because it's not just like, oh, they have to work together. It's like they have to work together in order to beat this like trial, right? And they are,
if they want to live.
and they're basically from the beginning kind of taught to have these like grudges. You know, those who are human have grudges against those who are not human, and vice versa, right? And then it kind of ends up being a very like he said, she said situation. About their history, right? Because they're having these grudges against the humans because they're like, you guys are leeching the magic. But then the humans are like, well, we're leeching the magic because you guys just kind of had it and we weren't treated very well, right? And the both sides are kind of like, wait, that's not how things, you know, were told and whatever. But Elyria has such a interesting history because she was there physically when this whole shattering event happened, when this like cataclysmic event happened, right? And so for her, it's not just the history of her people, but it's the history of her herself. And I found that so interesting because then you have these humans talking about it and she's like, you weren't there, you don't get to talk. It was a lot more complicated than that. And first off, I don't think nobody is giving her kudos for how much self-restraint she really has.
Oh, yeah. Like, there are so many people that should just be bodies. Yeah.
And they ended up being, but not by her hand.
But not by her.
Really want to, you know, she struggles, right? Like, with that whole, like, inner darkness thing, and then even afterwards, she's like, it's not like I love just, like, murdering people.
Yeah.
You know? But I do really like that you said that because I know that you haven't even like finished what you.
No, it's okay.
I really appreciate that picking up on that because I feel like like just give our girl some credit. Like the entire time
she's pissed.
Yeah,
like
she could do a lot more worse than she does, and she even says that I think at one point she's like, or in her head she's like, if they only knew.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. So
and. Feel free to interrupt me at any point because I think our listeners know that like I have a really bad habit of interrupting, but it's 100% like an ADHD-ness of like something pops out.
If I don't get it out, we'll lose it.
If it's not something I say, it's gone.
I get it.
But throughout this, we get a bunch of characters, right? And we kind of pivot back to that forced proximity because it's not just forced proximity between Elyria and Cedric, right? Who obviously becomes the love interest and everything, but it's forced proximity between humans and non-humans, and also just like the gangly crew of misfits, right? Because we end up seeing them all very quickly be like, oh crap, if I don't lean on these people, I'm dead, right? And a case in point, the people that don't lean on them die in terrible ways, right? Hate the humans, glad they're dead, but man, did they
definitely
die in terrible ways.
The thing is that if I'm gonna say like deadly trials in like all
they need to be deadly.
They gotta be deadly.
Yeah,
they have to actually be deadly. Yeah.
There was one amazing review that I did see that said something like, going through the trials is like wading through like a D&D campaign with a dungeon master who doesn't believe in plot armor.
Yeah.
And I was like...
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. There were so many points where I was just like, man, I'm having to really remind myself that like, one, plot armor doesn't seem to exist, but two, like Cedric doesn't have any. You know, like, Elyria has a little bit, right? She's got where she's badly hurt, but the people around her are fair game. And so from her perspective, it's so funny to think about all of the ways that she's just watching kind of like her loved ones almost die. And the fact that she's not more stressed out constantly is crazy. And the fact that she lets them go outside of her like arm's length is wild, because the moment that they're not directly attached to her hip, They are almost being killed constantly. But Elyria we get a lot of backstory with her, right? We end up finding out that she had a like epic love that goes into these trials, which is why she's got beef with the trials.
Another how dare, by the way, but we'll get there.
Whoa, we'll get there. We find out the only reason she's really going into these trials is because this great love sister is going in, and she knows that the sister is probably not going to be able to make it if the brother couldn't make it, right? So she's like, nope, gotta go in. And this guy, I'm blanking on his name, the epic love.
Cedric?
Evander?
Oh, Evander.
Yeah. He is like haunting the narrative the entire time, right? Which I love when a character is dead by the beginning of the story and still is such a like impactful character, you know, because you end up seeing that everything she does, everything she kind of thinks and how she acts, especially dealing with Cedric and everything, it all comes back to this guy, right? Even the little things of like feeling semi-guilty because Evander's sister is with her as she's seemingly falling in love with this other person, you know?
It makes that little plot twist just hurt.
So then we get to the plot twist. Miss Ma'am. So, listeners, you know, they're going through these trials. Everybody is dying. And we get to a point where epic love Evander comes out of the woodwork. Right? And I love that Cedric's like, something ain't right, but I don't know if it's because I'm right or if it's because I'm petty. You know, like, he's just like,
I'm mad at myself because I knew something was off with this guy, but also, like, I was being a little bit of a jealous bitch. So that was my play.
And it's, you know what? We've all been there. We have all had somebody come in our life and we're like, I don't like you, but I don't know if I'm right to not like you or if it's because I don't want you to be liked.
And then the worst part is when you turn out to be right, you can't say I told you so because you never spoke up to begin with.
And so we've all been in Cedric's shoes, right? But so Evander shows up out of the woodwork and he's like, hey, I've been here 20 years. Glad you guys are here. Oh my God, Elyria, we get to catch up now. Things are great. Who's this guy? But then he stabs his sister.
I knew that was the part you were gonna bring up. I knew it.
He stabs his sister. And the fact that it would have hurt less if he stabbed Elyria. Because she was already kind of getting sus of him, right? Like, she was already like, the way that he's acting and the eyes he's giving me are not cohesive with who he was. Right. But also, you've been in here for 20 years and you're telling me you didn't go a little crazy, right?
Right.
But his sister immediately is like, oh my God, I got my brother back. Everything is great. Yeah. Right? The idea of getting one of my siblings back after 20 years just for one of these assholes to stab me? Devastating.
Yeah.
That's why it happened.
I would say that I get the most DMs after people have finished chapter 42.
Now that we're homies, you're going to be getting the DMs.
Good.
I was like, I got to keep it cool, calm, and collected prior.
Yes, I think that it kind of is that classic, like, where's the body situation, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, like, him looming over the thing the whole time. So I get a lot of, like, I knew it, like, you know, type reactions when he shows up for the first time. They don't give me I knew it when he stabs kids.
I knew something funky was going to happen. I just assumed he was going to kill Cedric. I just assumed the human was going to die, not the sister gets stabbed.
I mean, he almost did.
Yeah. You know, I think it was a little bit not necessarily like he was like, I'm evil, I'm gonna kill my sister. It was like, she's so convenient because she's so trusting and like near me all the time because like
she trusts me because I'm her
she just brought her big brother back. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so I mean, it is certainly like very devastating, and that act, of course, like really carries us through to the entire, you know, like through that last part of the book.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of everything that comes to a head out of like learning about like the depths of his corruption and why he has
Mhm.
survived these 25 years in the Crucible, and you know what it means for this kind of like greater plot and like greater evil that's out there and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of it's like a lot of like shock moment, but also like the digging down into, you know, the motivations behind that and stuff. I think is what we see the seeds of and like the threads lingering through the next two books too.
Speaking of digging, right? You really dug my heart out when Evander dies, and you have a glimpse into his actual self when he like breaks free of whatever for a minute, right? And he like has this realization, and it's the like, hold on.
Man, you said no in such a
I did not, in
Spanish way
fact,
right
want
there.
anything from the restaurant. I don't know what you want from me.
No, but it's so funny the way you said no.
But so you end up having this moment that I think was really important, not just obviously for the overall plot and everything, but really important for Elyria to have gotten that moment of like goodbye and closure with Evander, because now she knows exactly what happened, right? But now she also knows that she was still able to help him, even if that meant murdering him, which like all been there, am I right? Having to
yes, I think that it really paints like she didn't have closure for 25 years, right? He just went into the Crucible and he never came back out. And they all like were like he died in there, but like they never
got a body.
He was wasting away, self-medicating, like just kind of trying to run from everything as a result of that at the beginning of the book. And so having that like singular moment even after so much tragedy was definitely very important, and I think it is the thing that also like for her was necessary before she would ever be able to like open her heart again as well. So like just in terms of her personal journey and like relationship with Cedric and everything like that, like there wasn't going to be the ability for her to get past like that thought without some sort of closure for her too, I think.
Yeah.
I'm so glad then you went ahead and
killed Cedric,
brought him back.
Really glad you gave us the closure.
Stabbed her emotionally and mentally by having Zephyr just betray the whole lot of them.
Glad you gave her a chance to have a happy life.
She had 30 seconds.
Book 2. Elyria's in therapy now.
Yeah. Elyria's going across the continent looking for a therapist.
Yeah, you know, I guess that was kind of mean from me, actually, because they have that moment with the Crucible where they're like, we did it, you know?
And then you took it all away.
Maybe this means we can have our after. Like, you know, who knows what's going to happen, but like maybe there's that glimmer.
Yeah, literally like 5 pages, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they leave.
Yeah.
Then they leave. And then they finally smooch, which I was excited about. And he uses that opportunity
to stab himself.
To steal this dagger from her so he can stab himself.
If she doesn't have some sort of PTSD war flashback the next time they kiss.
Why are you giving her ideas right now?
I need her to have to be like, nope, your hands gotta be tied up somehow before I kiss you, because last time your hands were not busy. You stabbed yourself. Yeah.
You're so funny.
I need that now. I need her to be like, nope, sorry, we can never kiss again because last time we did, you killed yourself.
He definitely does have a lot of trauma related to Cedric's self-sacrificing ways, but I will reassure any listeners who have read the book that it does not prevent them from kissing again.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Good. They deserve a smooch.
They deserve a lot of things, don't they?
Sans blood. No blood.
Unless they're into the blood. We don't know. We don't know.
Contextual.
Unless they just finish slaughtering people, in which case that's also fine.
Okay, so I have a question because this is at the very beginning of the book. right? And I don't know if I just missed a part of explanation or if I'm just stupid. Okay? Why were those men beefing with her in the bar?
Why indeed?
Okay, so I wasn't
Pretty
stupid.
sure that's plot.
It's fine.
No, that's plot for the future.
I was just making sure I didn't miss something. My bad for Karen.
There are mentions of things in the beginning that will receive answers or, further connection and development for sure.
If we don't get Cedric meeting this man,
I mean,
you can't give me the who did this to you without giving me the payback after.
Yeah.
This is the beauty of a multi-book, plot line, I think, right? So we can
Yes.
There's lots to revisit.
I love the barkeeper.
Without too spoily for book 2. So.
Oh yeah, Artie?
Yeah.
The tavern.
Yeah,
master.
I love him with all my heart because he is the embodiment of a disgruntled dad, but also like a disgruntled teacher. Because he's like, I will keep you fed. I will make sure you're safe. I would be really sad if they hit you again, but by God, do you create a mess. And that is the energy that I think.
Literally his whole vibe.
Yeah.
He's like, God, again?
Yeah.
Vibes. But of course he cares. He cares. So.
Yeah. I love that.
No, I got a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen...
Yeah, this book really evoked a lot of emotions out of me.
Yeah, I think if you've ever seen the second live-action Scooby-Doo, Spooky Island...
Yeah.
And they have all of the faces in the pool...
Uh-huh.
Those are just all of my emotions.
Yeah.
And Shaggy's just like reaching in, trying to find the right one. And he keeps going like,
this scene, actually.
Yeah. That's how I feel, where I'm like, I need to find the right emotion that I'm trying to focus on right now. But there's just like a lot, right? So you throw in, I think you might be the queen of like plot twists towards the end, right? Zephyr.
There were a lot. I did stack a lot, I think. It really starts with like the fireworm battle and then just kind of like goes right up until the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Zephyr, traitor. Probably being coerced. Maybe she just sucks. We'll have to find out.
Justice for Zephyr. I'll say it.
Say it. You would.
Shut up.
Frickin' Cedric's boss guy.
Okay, but his name was Leviathan. I looked at that and I was like, if this guy isn't a bad guy in some capacity, I will legitimately.
But did we always know
I would have been
Leviathan?
more surprised.
I mean, it's mentioned at the beginning, but it's very respectful, so he refers to him as Lord Church.
I just remembered him as Lord Church.
I was like, Leviathan Church? That is the most evil name I've ever heard.
Like serpent. So.
Yeah.
He did have the potential to be a snake from the beginning. I will say that I think the fun thing for me is like finding the right balance of, a plot twist that comes completely out of left field that there aren't enough seeds for is sometimes like
boring.
Jarring.
Yeah,
and boring and feels like shoehorned in. And similarly, like I think it's fun for me as a reader, at least, to like get to certain moments and being like, I knew it, So like I really wanted to have like that balance of some moments that were like, I knew it, I called it, and some moments that were like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So, I think that makes for a very.
They're all stabbing, guys. Listeners, all of the moments are stabbing.
Do we get a definitive answer on Cedric? Because I have theories, but like I don't know.
You mean like in the will we get one like in the future in like the next book or whatever?
Like in the next book, can we get like something?
Why he is the way he is,
about Cedric, and Cedric is going to learn a lot more about himself.
Okay, cool.
And another important question about Cedric: does he get a new armor plate? Because dude needs it.
Luckily, there's a small time jump between like where book 1 ends and book 2, so plenty of time for him to like restock.
Yeah, he needs reinforced armor.
Exactly, and
double
pining for several months.
Yeah,
so it's good.
Yeah, double plated. He walks around and it sounds like a frickin' like aluminum can with some coins in it.
AC is too low. It needs to be higher.
He stresses me out. He can't just be like going for walks.
Poor man.
He
Like,
literally
outside of
he
capable, he's very capable. I swear. Like,
Not in it.
you know, and that's part of it.
And I
was like,
and that was the part. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, so like that's part of it, right? Is like he's supposed to be this, you know, very well trained like knight, and he's been preparing for this. But in the end, like the inequity between like what a human is capable of versus just like the innate survivability when someone has like the kind of magic that the Arcanians have, like it's not balanced. And so like he does hold his own in his moments, but like overall, like
Overall, he a little
he's
baby.
hilarious a hell of a lot of the
He needs a
time.
bubble. Put that boy in
Yeah,
a bubble.
'cause it's even like if they take away the abilities and everything, like you still have the Arcanians are able to like just have the experience of being alive for a really long time.
Exactly.
And
I
so
mean, you can't compare someone who's just been alive
Yeah.
for, you know,
a normal
couple
amount of
hundred
years.
versus
Yeah.
not even 30 years, right? So I think that that's also like a big part of it. And to your point earlier about the kind of separate like perceptions that the humans versus the Arcanians have too, I think that was really important for me to like play into it. Like, how does one's perception of like the world and of other races shift when you've been on this planet for like hundreds of years versus like the way that just we as humans, like stories shift and tales get told and prejudices get passed down and stuff through generations, because you have like multiple generations happening on the human side, whereas like you have Fae who lived through the events of the war and the shattering and the great betrayal and stuff like that. And so, you know, I think that to me it was very natural feeling for like the human hatred of the Arcanians to be that much more like visceral and like angry, and like the, you know, resentment that breeds over generations, versus for a lot of the Arcanians they're just kind of like indifferent slash like look down upon them slash, you know, like their disdain is fed more by just kind of like
Watching
the
humans do what humans do.
superiority complex versus like the true like feeling like we're being slighted, like we're at a disadvantage and it's all your fault, like type stuff that
Yeah.
humans deal with.
Going on to that vein of thought, were the humans treated badly before the shattering?
So I think it's like, again, it's not necessarily, it's all perception based. Like the natural kind of hierarchy that like would, not natural, but like, you know, that would develop based off of the idea that like some people have powers or some people have like the life experience to be more educated or more, you know, like develop economically, you know, like all of these things that can come out of just this vast difference, I think. And so again, that perception of being like, is it that we're being treated poorly, or is it that our conditions are just like seem unfair in comparison to others? And what does that truth really like, what is the truth, like what's the objective truth within all of these situations? And the concept too that like painting history with broad strokes is never accurate. So from both sides, where Elyria is like, it was a prosperous time, and then like humans being like, not really, and like, you know, maybe two things can be true at once, right? Like maybe individual conditions were not always going to be perfect, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. Like there's no such thing as, you know, a society that truly operates as like a true utopia. And then also like maybe, you know, things were, you know, not as great on the ground as they looked from up high, you know, type thing.
Yeah.
Kayla, did you have any other questions?
Is Nox truly as they seem? Because I keep flip flopping on Nox. Because I'm like, on one hand, seems like a cool person. On the other hand, I adored Zephyr.
I was like, we flip flop on Nox, but
you know, stabbed us all in the back. So like,
I think that the lingering questions of like the motivations for certain other champions to be in the Crucible, and like why were they really there without like being specifically like human or Fae, are things that like I very purposefully leave to explore.
I freaks with Nox. I like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, but now I don't trust anybody.
learning more about like nocturians in general and the kind of like reason for like Thrag and Nox, like for being there in the first place, like all things that we get to explore.
Heck yeah.
Good.
I am definitely looking forward to the next ones.
Same.
Well, madams, this is the part of the episode you can promote your stuff,
Awesome.
talk your talk.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I, of course, love, like I've mentioned, love hearing from readers. You are always welcome to slide into my DMs, follow me on social. I do share a lot of character art and other fun, sneak peeks and stuff from this book and the future ones. So I'm at Gretchen Writes Books on most platforms. I'm also on TikTok at Gretchen Powell Fox. And yeah, book 2 slated for release this fall. Smoke and Scar is available on like pretty much all, all booksellers. You can grab a copy, and it's on Kindle Unlimited for those who may be curious to read for themselves. And yeah, I just have really enjoyed being able to chat, talk shop and talk about this book with you guys.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, I feel like I've thanked you a bunch of times, but thank you for being here. Listeners, thank you for listening to us yet again. Any and all links will be in the description down below or wherever they are on wherever you're listening. And we will see you in the next episode.